I call the October 10, 2017 meeting of the Portsmouth City Council to order. And we'll start by me asking my colleagues to stand with me as we have the invocation by Dr. Alan McFarland, the pastor of Calvary Evangelist Baptist Church, Evangelical Baptist Church. And then I'll ask the audience to stand as we are led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Bill Moody.
And I appreciate the privilege. I just mentioned to the mayor that I have to go to Richmond and pick up my wife of 50 years. She's at the airport waiting on me. So I just want you to know how special you are to me. Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the privilege that we can come as a city, we can come and meet and discuss business. But God, we understand that you hold the world in your hands, which means that you're holding us together. So without you, we can do nothing. So in the precious name of Jesus, we come giving you glory, giving you praise for being able to be here tonight. Whatever is said, we give you the glory. For it is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item is an electronic roll call. Please indicate your presence by voting yes. And Madam Clerk, we have a quorum.
Yes, sir.
Which brings us to the consideration of the approval of minutes. We have the minutes of a call meeting of September the 25th, 2017, the minutes of a call meeting September 26, 2017, and the minutes of a regular meeting September 26, 2017. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and it's been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. Madam Clerk, that motion carries. And Madam Clerk, at this point, would you read the protocol for speakers who desire to speak during this meeting?
Ladies and gentlemen, City Council rules require a limit of up to 5 minutes to speak. As you approach the speaker's podium, you will notice a timer. At the beginning of your 5 minutes, you will see a green light. 4 minutes into your remarks, you will notice a yellow light. At the end of 5 minutes, you will see a red light, hear a beep, and we ask that you conclude your comments at that time. While speakers have an opportunity to address council on matters of public concern, all comments should be made in a manner that respects the seriousness of the forum and should not be made in a belligerent, sarcastic, or demeaning fashion. A speaker who fails to observe this basic rule of decorum will be deemed out of order and not allowed to conclude his or her comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And this brings us to public hearings, item 17-442, a public hearing on a certain code amendment. And Madam Clerk, would you read the caption, please?
Yes, sir. CA 1702 citywide. The City of Portsmouth proposes to amend the text of the zoning ordinance to repeal and replace Section 40-1-5.1, excuse me, parking, which sets out the standards for vehicular parking and accommodations for bicycles and pedestrians. Included in the amendments are the elimination of maximum parking standards, more flexible parking requirements, establishing long and short-term bicycle parking requirements, consolidating all of the parking and related provisions in a single location in the ordinance, including the D1 downtown, D2 Uptown standards and proposing a special exception process for deviations from the parking requirements.
Thank you. Dr. Patton, do you have anything to add?
Yes, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Bob Bowen, our planning director, will come forward to share.
Good evening, Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Cherry, and members of City Council. As we discussed briefly back during your work session, just point out that Section 40.1-5 of the city's current zoning ordinance regulates the development standards that are applied on properties when they are developed or when they are redeveloped. Within that, 40.1-5.1 specifically relates to parking standards. Since the adoption of the city's new zoning ordinance back in 2010, we almost immediately started having issues related to developments trying to meet the parking requirements, either in terms of the parking lot layout or in terms of parking space numbers, a variety of issues such as that. And that was further exacerbated when the city used to have a Type 2 site plan process, which allowed us to deal with some of those issues, but that process was deemed to be not legal, since it was requiring the Planning Commission to take action on something which the General Assembly had not conveyed upon them, enabling legislation to do that. So we've been having these issues for a while. Back in 2015, we approached the Planning Commission, discussed these issues, and the Planning Commission voted to authorize the Planning Department and the city staff to begin to work to analyze and bring back potential code amendments related to the city's parking standards. And as you'll recall, back in February of 2017, as well as in July of 2017, we discussed the issue of parking standards with both the City Council and Planning Commission at your joint work sessions that you had in those 2 months. The way the proposed amendments have been provided for you tonight, they're basically broken down into 3 different parts. The first one is, again, related to the flexibility required for parking layout standards, which was lost with the loss of the Type 2 site plan process. It's creation of a special exception process. The second part, which I think is the part most people will be interested in, repeals and replaces 40.1-5.1, which that contains all of the mandatory parking requirements based on different land uses. So we went through a process using our consulting firm of VHB, and we went item by item through the parking standards and took a look at all that, looked at Hampton Road standards, looked at national standards, development trends, and revised those accordingly. In addition, a couple of things we did, we removed what had been applied in the 2010 code, which was a parking maximum, in which developers who wanted more parking would bump up against the top. I mentioned a couple of these developments before. Chick-fil-A ran into it, the Aldi store ran into it. And we found most of these developers were able to go through sort of a paper exercise of justifying their additional parking, but they eventually got there anyway. So it seemed like a kind of a bureaucratic process that really didn't serve a whole lot of purpose. So we've removed the maximums. In addition, we revised a lot of the minimums, as I mentioned, with the regular parking code. And then finally, that part 3, we've had a number of discussions about the D2 form-based code. We've discussed the fact that the D1 and D2 districts are both contained within appendices of the existing zoning code, and each one of those had their own parking standards. So as we work to eliminate the D2 district over time, as we are working on the zoning code, we're extracting things out of it. For example, we get an opportunity. This proposed amendment would take the parking standards out of the D2 and roll them back into the standard parking standards. And you will see in the future we'll be doing a similar thing with the sign regulations. So, from general perspective, the way we look at things, the parking is really about achieving a balance. Just like the pictures would show there, too much or too little, how much parking do you really need? We are a city that's mostly built out. A lot of the development we do is infill, so it's a real challenge trying to apply sort of a global or sort of a generic standard that might be workable in some other localities and apply it in our circumstances. So we try to use a common sense approach to developing our parking standards. And so when we went into the process, we applied some basic principles we wanted to look at. That number one, we want to make sure that meeting required parking on private property did not negatively impact public streets. In other words, sufficient enough parking on site, they weren't backing up into the street. We want to take in this as a holistic approach, dealing with parking for vehicles, bicycle parking, Also making sure we're accommodating pedestrians moving about on the site in a safe manner. For example, looking at parking lots for all of those types of users. Recognizing that a lot of developers we deal with are familiar with their own parking demand, what their requirements are, and taking into consideration what they know their needs are, as opposed to us applying, again, sort of a generic standard we've taken from some other text or some other book. And we also recognize, in terms of when we remove the concept of the parking maximum, there are pressures on developers to not build too much parking. It's additional construction costs, it's a higher cost for maintenance, and there's also stormwater management fees that apply to these parking spaces. So we believe we'll let sort of natural forces put a cap on parking. In addition, in fact, we don't have a lot of large parcels in enforcement to develop. And then finally, we just recognize there are unique cases for a variety of reasons in which you need an exception process. We had a number of these went through the Type 2 site plan process, and we've been running into problems since that Type 2 process was eliminated. So we definitely need some sort of an exception process to allow projects to look for some relief in the event they cannot fully comply with the standards as we've written in the city code. So what do we propose and what's before you tonight? Again, we've eliminated the maximum parking standards. We've been more flexible in terms of the parking standards overall. We've consolidated, again, those D1 and T2 parking back into the code with the ultimate plan on eliminating those independent appendices in the zoning ordinance as we proceed with the rest of the zoning ordinance rewrite project. Again, we've created an exception process. And I'll mention along that same line, we've removed the current code standard, which does not allow a developer to ask for a variance. For example, a pretty standard provision in almost anything in the zoning ordinance. Our current code precludes developers from requesting any type of a variance, so we remove that as well. We've gone back and looked at the bicycle standards. And I just mentioned, if you don't understand the difference between short and long-term bicycle parking, just quick explanation. If you live in an apartment, for example, it was your bicycle, that's a long-term bicycle parking. If you had a visitor ride a bicycle over, they'd be short-term. So we've tried to create a little bit more refined bicycle parking, actually lowered the overall amount of bicycle parking required, but trying to be smarter about how you require it. We have some procedures that were in our existing code that kind of bloated this TDM process, which really deal for parcels larger than anything we develop here, parking more than we need. So we're just taking that out of the ordinance completely. And then the last thing, and just to give you an example, again, some of the issues we have trying to apply the current code, we want to treat shopping centers as a single use. And so I give you an example. For example, if you look up at Kroger Marketplace, you take one of those little strips that has maybe a restaurant in it and a couple of retail stores, and the retail and the restaurant parking generation standards are different. We've had cases in there where a building has switched from one to the other and can't meet their parking requirement, even though they're surrounded by parking in the shopping center. So this doesn't make any sense to have a code that works that way. So we're putting in a procedure to treat shopping centers holistically. So the parking for the shopping center basically is being shared by all users in the shopping center. We don't have to go through these calculations every time somebody gets a new tenant. Just a quick discussion on our special exception process. This is permitted by Virginia State Code, was in the city zoning ordinance prior to 2010. Operates under similar authority as a use permit, except in this case it'd be something that would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals instead of going to City Council. And one of the reasons we want to do that is obviously it's faster. Board of Zoning Appeals process 30 to 45 days, where a use permit 3 to 4 months. And why is that relevant? Because that 30 to 45 days just happens to coincide with our typical site plan review process. So if somebody comes in and they're in site plan review, they need some sort of a special exception, we can accommodate that without a long delay for a use permit. Based on state code requirements, Planning Commission has the opportunity to get referrals on these applications. It can comment to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We would propose, as they're laid out in here, these are primarily for exceptions in site design. As I mentioned, we can run into issues related to stormwater management, can run into issues related to driveway locations, a number of things that affect the layout of the parking lot. We need some way for developers to resolve that. And one final thing, which comes up right away, going through special exception process, we do have a public notice process, just like you have for any other zoning items, so the public would have an opportunity to weigh in with the Board of Zoning Appeals on that. So again, just in summary again, 3 sets of proposed amendments as they're in your packet. Part 1 creates that special exception process. Part 2 repeals the parking standards piece, and Part 3 takes that D1 and D2 appendices and rolls that back into the main ordinance, giving us 1 set of parking regulations. little lengthy, but hopefully that explains everything. We've spent quite a bit of time working through all of these, and I'd be glad to answer any questions should you have any.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Baldwin and Madam City Manager. This is a public hearing on the proposed amendment to amend our zoning ordinance as it relates to parking. And I now open the public hearing. If you desire to speak either for or against the amendment, please come to the lectern and state your name. You have 5 minutes. Does anybody in the audience want to speak on this matter? This is a public hearing. You don't have to be signed up. Hearing none and seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Ladies and gentlemen of council, in order for us to put this on first reading, I need a motion to adopt. Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion to approve this on its first reading. It's been duly seconded. Any discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, this item carries. And we'll have it back on our next agenda for its second reading. This brings us to City Manager's Report, item 17-443, the consideration of adoption of an ordinance accepting certain grant funds. Madam Clerk, would you read the caption, please?
Yes, sir. An ordinance accepting an Emergency Food and Shelter National Board Program grant in the amount of $12,135 from the Department of Homeland Security and appropriating said sum in the FY 2018 Grants Fund for use by the Department of Social Services to assist Portsmouth citizens who have emergency shelter or utility needs.
Thank you. In order for us to put this before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Move for adoption.
We have a motion to adopt the ordinance. It's been duly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. Madam Clerk, that motion carries.
Yes, sir.
This brings us to item 17-444, which is the consideration of an ordinance accepting certain grant funds. And Madam Clerk, would you read the caption, please?
Yes, sir. An ordinance accepting a grant in the amount of $92,360 from the Department of Homeland Security and appropriating said funds in the FY 2018 Grants Fund for use by the Portsmouth Police Department for port security, including repairs and upgrades to the safe boat.
Thank you. In order for us to put this before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Move adoption.
Is there a second? Second. We have a motion that's been made to adopt the ordinance, and it's been duly seconded. Any discussion? We do have one speaker, Donna Sy. And ma'am, you got 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Donna Sy, and I live in the Woodbine Farms neighborhood. 17-444 is an ordinance accepting a grant for over $92,000 from the Department of Homeland Security and putting the money in the 2018 grant fund for use by the Portsmouth Police Department for port security and also for repairs and upgrades to the safe boat. We are providing port security for the Virginia Port Authority and the Virginia International Gateway Incorporated after they clipped the citizens so that we have to execute a loan agreement to cover the loss of personal property tax revenue from the facilities lease agreement. What about the $187,000 the Virginia Port Authority gave to Portsmouth Park and Recreation Department for a fishing pier at City Park? Was that hush money? How come the $187,000 wasn't used to repair and upgrade the safe boat? In this way, we could save the Department of Homeland Security money that could be used for something else like implementing restorative practice in the juvenile justice system. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. The chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Sy,
Talk to the hand. Don't talk
thanks for being here tonight. Anyway, I wanted to let you know, the money that you mentioned for the fishing pier in the form of a grant from the Virginia Port Authority could only be used for that purpose. That was a specific grant that we were fortunate enough to win, and building a fishing pier, I think, was a good thing to do for the children, the city of Portsmouth. I think fishing is a good activity, keeps kids off the street, and even some of us older people like to do it as well. But that grant, once again, could only be used to build a fishing pier. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Ready for the motion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. Madam Clerk, that motion carries.
Yes, sir.
Which brings us to item 17445, which is the consideration of another ordinance accepting certain funds. Would you read the caption, please?
Yes, sir. An ordinance accepting $1,400 of funding received from the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services and appropriating said amount in the FY 2018 Behavioral Healthcare Services Fund for use by the Department of Behavioral Healthcare Services to acquire a prevention data license in furtherance of its efforts to address opioid abuse.
Thank you. In order for us to consider this matter, is there a motion to adopt?
Move for adoption.
Is there, okay, we do have a motion and a second to adopt. Any discussion? Hearing none, ready for the question. All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, that motion carries.
Yes, sir.
Which brings us to item 17446, which is consideration of a resolution pertaining to a certain loan agreement. Madam Clerk, would you read the caption of the resolution, please?
Yes, sir. A resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a loan agreement with the Commonwealth of Virginia for a loan of $3.4 million to cover the loss of personal property tax revenue resulting from the terms of that certain amended and restated deed of facilities lease agreement entered into as of September 21st, 2016 by the Virginia Port Authority and Virginia International Gateway, Inc.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
In order for us to consider this, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion to approve, and it's been duly seconded. And we do have registered speakers, and the first speaker is, well, we only have one, Mr. Ceremonies, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Yes, sir. And sir, you have 5 minutes, and would you adjust the mic, please?
Does this thing work? Oh, okay. My name is Ross Ceremonies, and my telephone number is 757-484-9000. My email is serenoross@aol.com, and I live in the Sterling Point neighborhood. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Rowe, and City Council members and staff. Can you all hear me? Okay. I have some questions regarding Resolution 17446. What is this $3.4 million loan to be used for? How is this loan supposed to be distributed once it is obtained? What is this facilities lease agreement? Who signed it and approved it? I want a copy to try to get it now in the event that you all have it up there. Of that lease so I can review it and distribute it to the citizens of Portsmouth. It's very important that they know what is going on with their money. This country is for the people, by the people, and of the people. We want representation as how our money is being spent. How come there weren't any informed, how come there weren't 2 lease agreements? One for the Virginia Port Authority and one for Virginia International Gateway. When was the lease agreement presented to the Portsmouth Port and Industrial Commission for their approval? When were the citizens made aware of the condition of the lease so they could give their consent for it? Does anybody know it? This country was created for the people, by the people, and of the people, wasn't it? I want a person on the staff to contact me tonight for an appointment to address my concerns. I'm 90 years old, and I want some answers before I croak. Now, for tomorrow or next week, don't let it be pushed aside. I'd like to get some answers. I want and will distribute the answers that he or she will give me because the citizens of Portsmouth are entitled to stand up for their rights to know, and thank you very much for your cooperation. Amen.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if it's no objection from council, can the city manager give us the terms of the loan, the period, and the interest rate?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any questions for me while I'm here?
No, sir.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, I'm going to ask Mrs. Ellis Kelly, our CFO, to come and share said information.
Could you repeat exactly what you?
Just so the public will know the purpose, the terms, interest rate.
This is a bridge loan that the city is acquiring from the state of Virginia. It's a 0% loan that the Commonwealth is providing $1.7 million for FY17, $1.7 million for FY18, and if approved in their biannual budget, they will also approve another 1.7 in FY19. The terms of this loan agreement are for the first 2 years that are in their biannual budget. It's a 0% interest loan to cover the loss of personal property revenue that was resulting from the terms of a lease agreement signed by the port and the VIG International Gateway Incorporation. The city has 3 years of a loan. After the 3 years are up, the personal property tax revenue will be compared from FY17 to FY22. And as part of the loan agreement, depending on how much our personal property revenue has increased, we will make repayments of that loan of a minimum of $200,000 up to $1.7 million, depending on how much our personal property tax has increased.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to make sure that the previous speaker, Mr. Cicerone, gets a history of the agreement at the appropriate time. Maybe, I think he gave us his email address, maybe could even be emailed to him.
Thank you, sir. Madam City Manager, would you have a staff person get any additional contact information? Okay. Any further discussion on this matter? All right, ready for the question? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. The motion carries. Which brings us to item.
I was supposed to speak. I signed up.
We don't have it on the list.
You're not on the agenda, ma'am. And please don't outburst.
Ms. Sy, if you just wait a second, please. Where's she going?
This brings us to item 17447, which is the consideration and adoption of a resolution approving the issuance of certain bonds by the Portsmouth Redevelopment and Housing Authority. Madam Clerk, would you read the title of the resolution, please?
Yes, sir. A resolution approving the issuance by the Portsmouth Redevelopment and Housing Authority of its revenue bonds for the acquisition and renovation of a portion of Dale Homes Apartments housing facility located in the city of Portsmouth, Virginia, Phase 2.
Thank you. In order for us to consider this matter, is there a motion to adopt?
Move for adoption.
Is there a second? There is a second. Any discussion on the motion? Ready for the question? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Oppose, no. And Madam Clerk, that motion carries.
Yes, sir.
Which brings us to new business, item 17448, boards and commissions. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I have no nominations tonight.
Which brings us to item 17449, items submitted by council members. And we do have a resolution that is on the agenda. And you want to speak before that?
Sure, go. I'm not speaking about that.
Right. Let's handle what's on the agenda, then I'll come to you. Madam Clerk, would you read the caption of the resolution, please?
Yes, sir. A resolution expressing the desire to relocate the Confederate monument at the intersection of High Street and Court Street to the Cedar Grove Cemetery as soon as the governing state law clearly permits.
In order for us to put this before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt?
Move for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the resolution. It's been seconded. It's ready for discussion. Any discussion? Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, I would request that council consider some language change in the resolution. As council knows, I requested a more binding resolution, which really isn't possible given our code. However, there is some language here that just want to see if council would be amenable to changing. Any reference to Cedar Grove Cemetery is really premature until we know that that is an actual location where the monument can be placed. I would ask council so that we will not have to revisit another resolution just in case Cedar Grove is not the appropriate site, that we use a little more general language in place of Cedar Grove, such language as a location that would be feasible for the placement of the monument. Also, the other language that I would ask council to consider is the language that is in 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph, and also in the opening, where it refers to as soon as the governing laws clearly permit its relocation. That is too vague. I don't understand when will the governing laws clearly permit. I think that needs to be a little more specific so that we at least have some idea of the period we're talking about. Are we speaking of when the law is clarified by the Portsmouth Circuit Court's declaratory judgment? I think we would need definite language because it could be tied up in litigation and still be considered not clearly stated. So I would just ask if council would consider those two changes.
Are you offering an amendment to the motion?
I can, if there's no discussion.
Do you have an amendment?
Yes, I would move that council would amend the language referring to Cedar Grove Cemetery to a more generic site once it is feasible that the monument could be placed there. And also I would ask council to consider changing governing laws to a more specific time.
Do you have language that we can consider?
Yes. In place of Cedar Grove, where it says, whereas Cedar Grove Cemetery contains graves, I can give this to the clerk. I can pass it on to the clerk. The city has identified possible sites for relocation of the Confederate monument. So whereas the city has identified possible sites for the relocation of the Confederate monument, instead of specifically identifying Cedar Grove. And then where it speaks to governing laws, as soon as the law is clarified by the Portsmouth Circuit Court declaratory judgment.
All right, that's in the nature of a motion to amend the original motion, which was to adopt this resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to amend and ready for discussion on the motion to amend. Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, the original draft motion was drafted by our city attorney, and I believe he's the only attorney that really is qualified to advise the council. He drafted it for our purview. I know what my colleague is suggesting on the changes, but I'd like to hear from our attorney. And also, the people in the audience, I guess they have a copy. Now they don't have that wording, so I think that wording needs to be formalized in a written draft that has been approved by our city attorney.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, I was just going to ask that if the city attorney needs to comment on that, if we would allow him to comment to that issue, if this is a legal change or just a wordsmithing.
Thank you, sir. Mr. City Attorney.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, let me first say that the resolution presented to you was in response to a request by City Council. At the time of the request or the discussion came up about this particular resolution, I did present to you all the possibility of following some language in some prior city discussions. The resolution you have in front of you addresses some similar issues addressed by other jurisdictions, and that's how we came to this particular language. As it relates to location, I do believe that we do need to be specific about the motion and the substitutions in order so that both the public and the council has an opportunity to speak to those particular modifications. It is the council's prerogative at what point in time and how they want to publish that and present it for the individuals involved. At this point, based on this current amendment, I don't think we have a legal issue in front of you.
Good. Thank you. And we do have people who've signed up for this item.
We do.
And we do. And what's on the table now is a motion to approve the resolution. It's been duly seconded. Dr. Whitaker has offered a motion to amend the original motion with a language change, and that's been seconded. And so at this point, I will call upon the people who have signed up. The first person is Ann Stewart, and ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Rowe and City Council members. My name is Ann Stewart, and I live in the Siesta Gardens area of Portsmouth. Much of the information that I will share with you tonight is the result of very careful and thorough research by a dedicated and knowledgeable historian, Margaret Windley, who is with us tonight. Please know that I am deeply grateful for her friendship, assistance, and expertise. According to usmemorialday.org, Memorial Day was born out of the Civil War and a desire to honor our dead. It was officially proclaimed on 5 May 1868 by General John Logan, National Commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, in his General Order Number 11. He proclaimed, The 30th of May, 1868 is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land. The date of Decoration Day, as he called it, was chosen because it wasn't the anniversary of any particular battle. Our Portsmouth Monument is and has been a part of our Memorial Day remembrance for over a century. It was erected to the brave men who died in the war between the states, and that references the council records from 1874 to 1877, page 333. The Ladies Memorial Aid Association, later to be known as Daughters of the Confederacy, raised money by collecting pennies, nickels, and dimes to pay for the monument in a time when a dime was a terrific sacrifice. The inscription reads, "To our Confederate dead." That's it. In no place does it specify black or white. The only adjective that was mentioned in those council records from page 333 was, do you remember? To the brave men who died in the war between the states. For over 100 years, members of the Daughters of the Confederacy have adorned our monument with Memorial Day wreaths and have considered it a proud privilege. References from council records, July 25th, 1974. I am personally thankful for their efforts. Were you aware that 4 individuals posed for the statues on our monument? I'd like to tell you a little bit about them. J. Shirley Hope served as the model for the artilleryman. He might later have become a doctor, as found by an internet search. Frank Wonnacott served as the model for the cavalryman. He was a member of Monumental United Methodist Church. William Henry Buchanan, the model for the seaman for the Merrimack CSS Virginia, was the grandnephew of former President James Buchanan. William was wounded at the Battle of Brandy Station. It is said that when he modeled, he wore a sailor's cap that came from the Merrimack. The cap was said to have been stored in a trunk below the waterline and therefore was not burned in the fire. Finally, James Nicholson served as the infantryman. His presence honored a relative who was killed at the Battle of Shiloh. Parts of the data above were collected by William Blake for the statute's National Historical Register nomination. The above was information that I recently learned about our Confederate monument. I've always been proud of our monument, which honors our Confederate dead. I am sad to think that it might be moved or destroyed. I am equally sad to think that my taxpayer dollars might be used to make any changes to this elegant monument. I hope that this important piece of history is treated by our city leaders with the respect and recognition that it so richly and solemnly deserves. I wish I could end here. However, since the subject of whipping posts has been introduced into recent council records, I would like to read from a document entitled, "The African Society Becomes Emmanuel AME Church." This information is found on page 25 in a statement by Reverend George M. Bain, preacher in charge, Emmanuel Records. The old whipping post regarding Negroes was located at the corner of High and Washington as late as the early 1850s. If another such post existed at the corner of High and Court, as has been recently suggested, could it have had an entirely different purpose? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am. The next speaker is Cliff Page. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I care to address you this evening because I believe that slander has been brought upon the Confederate military in this city who served this city and the Commonwealth in the past. I have heard words from some of your members that have said that they were offended when they passed beneath the monument. I would draw your attention to the fact that this is a Navy port, and it has been ever since before the Revolution. We were a loyalist to the King, and we were not burned. Our history in this city is older than any other in Hampton Roads, and that is a draw for tourism. And we need that tourism desperately in this city today. The Confederate Navy was like the Union Navy that it drew from. It was an integrated Navy. You may not realize that, but the Confederate Navy was composed of 21% black people. They lived side by side. I'm in the Merchant Marine. When you're on a ship, it's a knife in your back, or somebody's going to help you with a knife to break a line. You do not turn against your shipmates. That's why they're called shipmates. This is the Navy of the Confederacy. And that monument at Court and High represents the Confederate Navy. Now let me tell you about the soldiers. They also are an integrated force in the Confederacy, unlike the Union forces. The Union forces had black officers put in front of white men, and the white men refused to serve them. The Confederate military was integrated. The Confederate Sons of the Confederacy put a monument up in Hampton to one of Lee's men who served him at a black church. And they said, what are you doing? They said, this man served with General Lee. The last man to surrender in the Confederate Army was a Cherokee brigadier general. The Confederate military was integrated from one side to the other. It was not about racism, and that monument is about the Confederate military. Now let me tell you about who it was in this city. We have another monument more important than this monument. It's called the Emerson Grimes Monument that's over at City Park, and nobody even knows about it. But this was a very important monument to the history of this nation, because under Emerson, the 2nd Battery of the Portsmouth Militia that served for nothing and paid for their own uniforms and their armaments, they went to Craney Island when the British came into our harbor, fired and sunk the Centipede, and kept the British from burning Norfolk and Portsmouth. If we hadn't done that in Portsmouth, this city would not be singing the Star-Spangled Banner, and we wouldn't have to worry about monuments in Baltimore being desecrated. No, we would be singing praise to the Queen. Because if this harbor had been taken, and if our shipyard had been taken, Washington and Baltimore would not have been the only place burned. Norfolk and Portsmouth would have been burned. And in the Civil War, before the Civil War, our militia was composed of our men in this city, the Portsmouth militia, the artillery, and 2 infantry units. The shipyard was burned overnight by the commander. The council of the city went there and said, please don't do this. If you burn the northern end of the shipyard, you're going to burn Lincoln Street. The commander shut the gates and burned the shipyard down, burned a number of ships in there. The Pennsylvania was in the ways there being built. It had its upper deck and its cannon deck planked over, burned it. This was all oak, a huge conflagration that could be seen from Suffolk all the way to Virginia Beach and down to Great Bridge. The next morning, the 2nd Artillery Battery went in there and took it. And then they went to 2nd Manassas and fought with the Confederates. And when Lee said to his general, bring these people together, we need to form an army of Virginia. We hadn't even seceded yet. They said, no, we're from Portsmouth, we're going home. And Lee turned to his men and he said, we must fight together. The Union troops have come across our border, and we had a codicil in the Constitution that gave us the right to secede. Most people don't know that. Some people call us traitors. We were not. We had a right under the Constitution to secede. And we believe that every state had that right, and Maine was the first state to talk about secession. We did it, and we did it as patriots. And anybody who slanders the Confederate military, who are honored with this monument downtown and the Grimes Battery, is doing Portsmouth's heritage bad news.
Sir, your time is up. Thank you. Next speaker is Denise Harrell. And ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and fellow council members. I'm Denise Harrell from Park Manor. The buzz phrase this summer is the Confederate monuments were erected during the Jim Crow era to establish white supremacy and to intimidate black people. We are fighting a graft created by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The monument in Portsmouth was erected by the Ladies Memorial Association on May 8, 1875, a number of gentlemen from our city and Norfolk County, which adjoined Portsmouth at the time, met and formed the Portsmouth and Norfolk County Monument Association to perpetuate the memory and the deeds of the gallant men who fell while battling for Virginia's rights. The Ladies Memorial Aid Association worked hard with the men to raise the funds for our monument, designed by Charles E. Castle. On December 14, 1876, the cornerstone was laid at the prominent intersection of High and Court Streets. The monument was made with North Carolina granite in the shape of an obelisk. The pedestal is inscribed with the words, "To our Confederate dead." And around the monument, the dates 1861, 62, 63, 64, and 65 are inscribed. On June 15, 1881, the capstone was raised with the help of the Ladies Memorial Aid Association, who manned the arms of the capstone and raised the capstone to its position. The monument was dedicated on June 15, 1893, at a cost of $11,763.34, all of which those funds was raised by those ladies. The LMA was created to bury the dead, take care of the cemeteries, and to erect war memorials to honor the dead. It is the reason that we have Memorial Day in this country. The United States Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal as the law in 1896. This war memorial in Portsmouth was erected to remember the soldiers and sailors who fought in the war between the states to give families in Portsmouth closure. They lost fathers, sons, cousins, and uncles that died on the battlefield and never came home. The widows and children needed closure. I feel our city government should be more focused on what is important to most of our citizens. We should be concentrating on stopping crime, putting more into our schools, lowering taxes, the economy, and the infrastructure. We are on a slippery slope. Today, Confederate symbols are being attacked, but all history is at risk. Do we want to be a nation without history?
Thank you, ma'am. The next speaker is Donna Sy, and ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Donna Sy, and I live in the Woodbine Farms neighborhood. 17-449 is a resolution to relocate the Confederate soldier statue to Cedar Grove Cemetery as soon as Virginia state law permits. On September the 25th, 2017, there was a briefing on the Confederate memorial statue. This issue of moving the Confederate monument was a decision by one person, not we the people. You remember the City Council meeting on June the 23rd, 2015? In the Virginian Pilot article written by Terry Daugherty on June the 26, 2015, it stated that Councilman Whitaker called for the removal of the monument with an agreement by Mayor Kenny Wright. The councilman stated that a cause that supported slavery should not be honored on public property. All of us have a right to be wrong. For my own understanding, a statue is not a cause. It cannot support slavery or anything else that I am aware of. A monument or statue is a memorial of a deceased person or an event. The Lord's Supper is a memorial of the death and sufferings of Christ. This is an event to remind us to live holy lives. The memorials to the Civil War dead were erected by people who didn't want their sons, husbands, brothers, and fathers to be forgotten. Confederate soldiers and Union soldiers didn't uniformly support slavery. They were young men who went off to war doing what they believed was their duty. Just like the men of today, all they knew was that someone from someplace else was coming in and telling them what to do. Just like the men of today, the loved ones were people of their time. These grim monuments were erected by grieving people of a different time and contain lessons for all of us. All these men knew was that someone from someplace else was coming in and telling them what to do. This is exactly what is happening today. Someone is sitting on city council and dictating what we the people have to do without our consent. We the people have to put up with tyranny that is leading us into anarchy by evildoers. This is not God's plan for America. The laws of nature and of nature's God implied that there is a systematic plan and process for us. God's long-term goal for us is to become kings and priests unto him and through his Son. God's short-term goal for us is to overcome the temptations in the world. We, the people, do this by a standard God gave to us, the Ten Commandments. The objective of God's standard is for we, the people, to accurately discern good and evil so we will overcome the temptation to do evil. The strategy is for each one of us to work out our release from wrongdoing with fear and trembling. This systematic plan and process is incorporated in our constitutional republic, which is based on natural law. Article 1 of the Bill of Rights of the Virginia Constitution, Section 1 states that all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights, namely the enjoyment of life and liberty with the means of acquiring and possessing property and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. In Section 2, it reads that people are the source of all power and the elected are their trustees and servants, and at all times can be corrected or held accountable to them. We, the people, have the right to acquire and possess property. This city council has denied the people their right to self-govern by seizing their intellectual property without their consent. The city council has set the stage for anarchy. This resolution is preparing the way for the anarchists to destroy our constitutional republic and place it with Marxist form of centralized government. In other words, destroy a capitalist form of self-government. God save Portsmouth, our Commonwealth of Virginia, and our country called America.
Thank you, ma'am. And our last speaker is Michael Gray, and sir, you have 5 minutes.
I wasn't going to be here tonight, so I apologize for the casual attire. But after I heard what was going to be mentioned tonight, I had to be here. As my major in college was history, political science, and I'm a history lover. I'm a realtor of 16 years. And when I get people coming into the area, I ask them where they want to live. 90% of the time, anywhere but Portsmouth. So I put them in the car and I drive them through Portsmouth. 70% of the time, they end up buying a house here. Mayor Rowe, when I campaigned for you, we talked about this aggressively of what can we do to change the housing in Portsmouth. In all your speeches, history, 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 history. Me too, I love history. One of the reasons why after college I moved to Old Town Portsmouth. But now you want to bleach it. And when you start bleaching things and get rid of things that offend you, that's when you mess up. Hitler started bleaching things and look what happened. The most demonic place in this world is probably Auschwitz. Millions of people were exterminated there. They didn't tear it down. It's a memorial. And you go there to realize what should never happen again. And you wanting to remove a monument, in my opinion, artwork, because it's not dedicated to war or slavery. It's dedicated to soldiers who died, my family members who died. And when you start trying to bleach history and get rid of history, then I don't want to hear you bragging about it, talking about it in speeches. The one thing that I love about the city of Portsmouth is that you can ride through Old Town and you see all the old homes. You see all the monuments. It's beautiful. Everybody loves it. If I wanted something to bleach, I'd go to Chesapeake. But I live here because I love history and I love Portsmouth. I've lived here my entire life with the exception of college. And Mayor Rowe, it offends me that before the campaign, you wanted the monument to stay. The people that put you in office because of what we believed in and what you said. And it's an embarrassment to us that you change your mind. Look, my best friend is black. He's been my best friend for 21 years. We are inseparable. We talk about this all the time. One day a week, we'll take a trip and we'll go to a historical plantation, and he can't stand it. And we have great conversations afterwards. I get it. Nobody likes things that offend them. But you can't get rid of everything that offends you. And I wish that you really would reconsider what you're doing. It's not a monument that we're praising slavery. It's a monument to people that died. U.S. soldiers that died. They received U.S. pensions. And I really hope that you would reconsider when you vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're back to the consideration of the motion to amend. And to refresh everybody's memory, the amendment is in the nature of some language change in the resolution. And Madam Clerk, do you have that language? Will you read it so that we can get back to the amended motion, or the amendment to the motion?
Yes, sir. A resolution expressing the desire to relocate the Confederate monument at the intersection of High Street and Court Street to a site as determined by City Council as soon as the law is clarified by the Portsmouth Circuit Court declaratory judgment.
Okay, that's the first change, and that's in the title. Can you
Yes,
read the
sir.
next change?
If you go down to paragraph 3, whereas remove Cedar Grove Cemetery, and it's whereas the city has identified possible sites for the relocation of the Confederate monument. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's talking about Cedar Grove. Okay, the next one is now therefore be it resolved by council of the city of Portsmouth, Virginia. Okay, Virginia, that the city council desires that the Confederate monument currently located at the intersection of High Street and Court Street be located to a site appropriate by city council. What's this? A site
Deemed appropriate.
deemed appropriate? Okay. Relocated to a site deemed appropriate by city council. As soon as the law is clarified by the Portsmouth Circuit Court declarative. Yeah, that.
Okay. Dr. Whitaker, does that capture your amendment? Okay. All right. We have discussion on the motion to amend the original motion. Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I don't really think we know what resolution that we're voting on.
Please, ladies and gentlemen.
Mayor, would you like to repeat it? I would invite you to repeat it. Not only do we not know the wording of the motion, we don't know what the cost is. How many of us would go out and sign for a house and have the price of the house left blank? Say, well, we'll let you know once you move in, and we'll let you know what the price is. How many would go buy an automobile and not know what the cost is? That's what we're getting ready to do. You would think a resolution that we can't even get the wording straight tonight would have the price, the cost. It doesn't mention any of those things. And I just don't think that's right, Mayor. And, you know, we talk about history. We're getting ready to celebrate the shipyard, and the city is advertising that, as it should, 250th year in existence. Well, a couple of those years was under the Confederate flag. So are we going to erase that, take an eraser out of that history and leave that blank? You know, someone said that tearing down Confederate statues or any monuments from our history will not change the past, but it will make for a poorer, less enlightened future. And that's the action that we're getting ready to take tonight. We're a historic city. Ever since I've been on this council, we've taken pride in our history. We've marketed our history. We've spent a lot of taxpayer dollars in trying to get tourism based on our history. But tonight, we want to erase that part of our history. A couple weeks ago, I mentioned the analogy, the Jim Crow era. We hear of that quite often. Nobody wants to go back to that era. But we one of our museums is the Colored Library. Its existence was because of the Jim Crow era. But when this council had to make a decision on what to do with it, that decision was that it needs to be preserved. I supported moving it. I was even on the board for a short period of time because I felt it was important. I didn't really remember a lot about that era because I was too young. But I think for future generations, it has a story to tell. That story is not very pleasant, but future generations need to know what happened so it's not repeated. The same thing with the Confederacy. Future generations need to know what happened when citizens don't get along, when states don't get along. Terrible things happen. So I think we need to slow down. This is like a knee-jerk reaction to Charlottesville. Ironically, the governor that immediately came out and his lieutenant governor said, let's tear them all down. Well, the governor kind of rethought that on a radio show up in Richmond recently when he was told the cost of taking the monuments down on Monument Avenue in Richmond was going to be in the neighborhood of $10 to $13 million. He said, and I'll quote him, he said, if I were on city council, I would rather see that money go into the public school system in Richmond to make it better. And I think he's absolutely right. I think whatever, and we don't know what the price is, whatever we're going to spend on that, we need to spend on something more substantial than just tearing down over 150-year-old monument to move it to a location. And at this point, we're not certain where that location is going to be now, since we're going to remove the wording of Cedar Grove. So I rest my case. I'm going to vote no to this resolution and to its, I guess, the additions to it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I remind council that what's before us is discussion on the amendment to the motion. The chair recognizes Councilman Clark.
Yes. In reference to the amendment to this motion, I did not support the motion, so I will be abstaining from the amendment because it doesn't matter the wording change because I do not support it as a whole.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Any other discussion? All right. The matter before us is consideration of the amendment to the motion to amend the resolution per the language read by the clerk. All in favor of the motion, vote yes. Opposed, no. And that motion does not pass. All right. Before us is the original motion, which is to approve the resolution as it was on the agenda. Ready for the question? The original motion, which is to approve. There's still people who want to talk? Okay. The chair will recognize first Councilman Clark.
Yes. Well, the reason when I spoke before, you said it was just on the motion of the amendment. So now I want to speak on the resolution itself. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. The amendment to the motion failed.
Yes.
So what's before council is the consideration of the resolution as it was originally submitted, and that's the motion before us.
Okay, that's what I want to speak on, because before I had restricted my comments to the motion for the amendment. Basically, I'd like to just point out that with this resolution, it's been discussed so many times about us doing declaratory judgment, and we have asked numerous times from our city attorney for opinions on the law and the legal side of this, and that's why they're going for the declaratory judgment. But we finally have a opinion from our city attorney which came out with this draft. The verbiage in this draft, and I quote, it says, as soon as the governing laws clearly permits its relocation. So it is of the opinion that it's not clearly legal to do it this time. So I reinsert what I said a few meetings ago about that this vote is voting on something that is clearly not legal to do, which I stated before is a violation of state code, violation of our charter, and violation of the oath of this office, and I will be voting against it.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if council is not in agreement on the previous language that was suggested, I would suggest that the language, as soon as the governing state law clearly permits, be deleted. Actually, it's unnecessary because you couldn't do anything anyway if the state law doesn't permit. So it's unnecessary language, but with that language in there, it would tend to tie us up in litigation, and it could be that it would significantly delay movement of the monument because you may be litigating issues that aren't even pertinent to Portsmouth. So I'm not clear when it says as soon as the governing state law clearly permits. When does it clearly permits?
Mr. City Attorney, you want to speak to that point?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. A week ago, Council asked me to submit language with regard to a resolution, and again, that language was that brought forth, as I said I would, the language similar and under consideration by the other jurisdictions addressing this particular issue. This council, to the extent that this amendment is offered and the resolution is put forward, is for this council to deliberate and determine how and in what final form it wants to move forward. So that is an issue for you all. If there is a legal issue, I can certainly take that up in a different form.
There is a legal issue, and we all know that this is a matter for council. The question is, what is the meaning of the term, the phrase, as soon as the governing laws clearly permits its relocation? That was the question from Dr. Whitaker.
I believe Dr. Whitaker put it best. It's when the law has been exercised and the rulings have withstood the current action.
Good. So what you're saying is when the final court case is resolved, or if it goes to court?
Correct.
Okay. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I have said before, 2 years ago when this item came up, this time last year when I was running for election to this body, that I would not support moving this monument. You know, this monument is not a statue of Robert E. Lee or Jeb Stuart or any particular person. It's soldiers and sailors defending their home who were certainly relatives, probably, of many of us sitting in this room. My own family is buried in Cedar Grove Cemetery, and one day I will be too. And if you pinned me to a wall and told me it had to be moved, I couldn't think of a better place. But my fiscal responsibility to the citizens is to watch and spend your money wisely. And I think whatever this amount of money is, and I frankly don't have any idea whether it's $100,000 or $500,000 or $1 million, or if it can even be done from an engineering perspective, I wouldn't vote on anything of this nature when we have no idea what the cost is. I think that's just reprehensible. So I will be voting no, as I've said several times, and I would suggest to my colleague, Councilman Whitaker, if you're not happy with the language, you could join me and vote no also.
Thank you. I ask for order, please. Please respect the council chamber and the fact that we're trying to conduct a very serious business up here. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes, Councilwoman Simmons, my thoughts are never emotional, so it's not an issue of whether I'm happy with the language or not. It's an issue of the rationale of the language. Also, as far as the language here, it speaks to a desire. It does not speak to an actual act occurring yet. And so I would like to propose an amendment, a motion. I would like to move that the language, as soon as the governing state law clearly permits, that language be deleted.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, this is an amendment to the original motion, which is to delete the phrase in paragraph 4, as soon as the governing laws clearly permits its relocation. And the corresponding deletion in the title of the resolution. We have a motion, and it's been seconded, and the motion is to amend the original motion, which was to adopt the resolution as written. The amendment is to make this change. What's the discussion on this amendment? Hearing none, we're ready for the question, the vote on the amendment to the resolution to delete the phrase as soon as the governing laws clearly permits its relocation. If you're in favor of that amendment, vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no. And that motion fails. So we're back to the original motion, which was to approve the resolution as written. Any further discussion? Ready? Dr. Moody, Councilman Moody.
You don't want me as a doctor. Thank you, Mayor. I would like to make a plea. Last year, we had an election, and during that election, some people sitting on this dais gave their position on the monument. And as I recall, most of them running, not all, but most of them said that they were opposed to the moving of the monument. So my plea tonight is for those who indicated that but are tempted to change their position, my plea is for them to keep the word that they gave to citizens last year. Simple as that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Let me say this as both mayor and individual member of council. I have been in local government for 4.5 decades. I probably have got more local government experience than what's up here on the podium combined. I have never seen our country at a national conversation that makes it very difficult for local governments to both live and survive. And it is the wrong path that we're on. We should be talking about unity, not division. We shouldn't be divided by a war that ended more than 150 years ago. And to be consistent when the conversation changes, it's not smart. It's not morally correct. And our national conversation has changed. But this is a monument to the dead, to 479 people who were either killed or died in the Civil War from Old Portsmouth and Norfolk County. The proposal is to move it to Cedar Grove Cemetery, which is the city's oldest cemetery, established in 1832, that has graves of veterans from every war, from the Revolutionary War to World War II. And of those veterans, 400 are Confederate graves. They're dispersed throughout the whole cemetery. There's a section, though, that has nothing but Confederate graves. It is a place where even the Sons of Confederacy hold their memorial services. It is both a museum and a cemetery. This is the appropriate place for this monument. And if this monument offends only one person in the city of Portsmouth, we should work hard. We should work hard to move in the monument and put it in a place that's less offensive. So with that, seeing no more discussion, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And the motion carries, Madam Clerk. Which brings us, Councilwoman Simmons, you wanted the floor. All right.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we're still under items submitted by council.
We are.
Knowing that, I make a motion that the Confederate monuments, on the decision to move the monument to Cedar Grove or to move it, period, is put on a referendum to be decided by the citizens of Portsmouth.
Please, this is a meeting, and please do not display any emotional outburst. Otherwise, I'll ask the Sergeant of Arms to remove you from the room. And we have a motion. Was it seconded?
Yes.
It was. All right. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important for a decision that obviously is very divisive for our city. I think it's extremely important that that decision be made beyond the 7 people sitting up here. I think the citizens of Portsmouth, in each election year, we talk about how important I'm going to be the candidate for all the citizens. I'm going to listen. Well, I think we need the citizens to weigh in on this on a ballot in November or some appropriate time. I think it's extremely important. We have important work to do in this city, and to continue to spend money that we don't even know what that amount is going to be, and to continue to let this thing fester. It's already divided this council. You can see by the vote. It's already lit up social media for the past, I don't know, 6 months or so. So I think it's time to put it on a referendum, let the citizens of Portsmouth decide it, and move on down the road after the votes are counted. So that's why I made the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. City Attorney, you asked for the floor. Do you have it?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, I just want to make the council aware the proposal was a motion to put the referendum to the question. The agenda has not been amended.
Thank you. Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor.
I'm going to reserve my comments till after the city attorney's advice is taken.
Okay. This is an item that's been submitted by a council member to add this to the agenda. Is that it?
Yes, sir, I moved to add an item to the agenda.
Second.
Okay. And we have a motion to add an item to the agenda. Any discussion? Dr. Whitaker?
No, it's after this
Okay.
vote has been taken.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. So what item do you want to add?
Mayor, I moved to add a motion to the agenda that the decision on whether the Confederate monument is to be moved or not is done in a referendum format.
The motion is that we hold a referendum on the relocation of the monument. Is that correct?
Second.
All right, we have a motion that's been duly seconded. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes, I just want to state that, as I said in the earlier meeting, moral leadership it takes courage. And for this council to consider placing on a referendum an issue of morality and ethics that we find at the heart of this issue, I would like to suggest that it does not take a consensus nor a majority to do the right thing. Morality is not governed by the majority. If that were the case, I would dare say that if you would have taken a majority vote amongst the states and those within the states, many of the laws that have oppressed African Americans, Native Americans, Hispanics would not have been passed. And so this council is charged with, I think, acting on an issue that was presented to this city by council, and therefore council should be the one that corrects it, and the issue of morality should never be governed by a majority.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Councilman Clark.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to say that I totally support the fact of having a referendum, so that way it goes to the people that they can vote on it and not just a small group of individuals. Because as these meetings go, it can ebb and flow just as Elizabeth River outside of that window does. We could have more speakers pro one night, more speakers con another night. Just like this evening, every speaker to this issue so far has been opposed to moving it for whatever reason. So I think the fairest way to do it would be the referendum and let the people come out to the polls and vote, and then we will have a good answer from the majority of the population. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion? Everybody ready for the motion, the question? All in favor of the motion, vote yes. Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Okay, we have Councilwoman Simmons.
Yes, sir, on a completely different note. Coming up for your entertainment and viewing, this weekend we have our annual Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. The schooners will set sail tomorrow out of Baltimore, and they will arrive in Portsmouth at the riverfront on Friday, this Friday the 13th. They'll start coming in the morning. On Friday evening, there is an event at Roger Brown's for the crew of the boats. On Saturday, many of the schooners will be open for you to visit and tours at the discretion of the skippers. And on Saturday night, there will be sea chanty sing-alongs at the former Portside area, which of course is open to the public. Of course, Saturday is always Farmers Market Day. And while you're looking at schooners and buying your fresh vegetables at High and Court Street between 9 and 1, before and after, if you're looking for a job, the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, celebrating its 250th anniversary on November 1st, is having a job fair this Saturday, October 14th, at our Tidewater Community College, Portsmouth campus from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They have notified the public that they will be hiring some 1,500 new people in the next year. And so their flyer says to come prepared with a resume, be ready to interview on the spot, have copies of unofficial college transcripts if available. They are going to be making job offers to eligible applicants on Saturday. And into next week, on Thursday, the 19th of October, we will have Portsmouth Homeless Assistance Day, at the Neighborhood Recreation Facility at 900 Elm Avenue from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. So we encourage you to attend all those public events.
Thank you, ma'am. And the chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I'd like to call upon the city manager. Some business owners, and I think they've communicated with most of the members of council, are concerned about the panhandling going on in the Arts District in Old Town. And I know the city manager is certainly aware of it and has been working on some things to alleviate it, but I'd like for her to shed some light on maybe the timetable and some of the things that she's looking at.
Any objection from council? Okay.
Mayor,
Okay.
Vice Mayor, members of City Council, the city's team, which consists of behavioral health care, social services, and the police department homeless outreach team, continues to meet and work on issues relating to homelessness. With this request from City Council, I'd like to schedule an item during a public work session to bring you up to date on this matter. We've just received a very detailed report from the homeless outreach team, which encompasses almost a year of work that they have been doing regarding this initiative and addressing issues, particularly in our downtown corridor. So with council's concurrence, I will schedule it for a presentation, and we'll provide you some information before that presentation that you will be able to glean some information and have your questions ready.
Thank you, Dr. Patton.
All right. Any other items submitted by council?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, I meant to have raised it in the earlier session. The issue of the overtime pay with the firefighters that received quite a bit of publicity. If we could get, no objection from council, if we could get an update on that issue at our next public work session. And in particular, there are a couple of issues that I want to make sure are answered. And the first is, when was the notice sent regarding the vacant positions on, I believe it was that Sunday? And secondly, who was given notice? Right, so those are the two issues I want to make sure as you update that you address. When was the notice that vacancies were open during that, I believe it was that weekend that we received that notice? When did the firefighters get notice of there being vacancies, and who was contacted?
Dr. Whitaker, are you speaking of a routine of there may be opportunities for part-time workers, which it was this weekend and possibly every weekend? So you're asking on last week, when was the notice?
I'm speaking specifically to the vacancies that created the issue on Facebook from that was publicized through the news, which you responded to us through email.
Yes.
I'm talking about that particular incident. When was notice given that there were
Vacancies to work that weekend?
Right,
Okay.
right.
All right.
Specifically that weekend. And to
Okay.
whom was the notice given?
All right, how is the process of notice being made?
Well, I want to know
That's what I'm,
who
yeah.
was specifically contacted.
All right, process, okay.
We squared away? Any
Yes.
objection?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other items? This brings us to 17-451, non-agendered speakers. And our first speaker is Darlene Washington. And you have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mayor Rowe, Vice Chair Cherry, council members, Dr. Patton, and Mr. Ashby. My name is Darlene Sparks Washington, and I am the Executive Director for Portsmouth Volunteers for the Homeless. I actually have some board members here, and I'm going to ask if you all will just stand quickly. Our business is a business of the heart, and it is to provide short-term emergency sheltering during the winter months. We also operate a year-round service center or drop-in for individuals who are homeless. Our goal is to inspire hope, rebuild confidence, and restore faith for individuals who are homeless so that they can begin to see and create a pathway back to their lives. As we're approaching the opening of our winter shelter season, I wanted to share a little bit about our organization, including some of our accomplishments and the ways that we contribute to assisting individuals in our city currently experiencing homelessness. Our sheltering services run from November through April. And last year, we partnered with over 25 congregations to shelter 205 distinct individuals for over 160 nights of sheltering. That's 32,800 nights stays with dinner meals. PVH has become the nexus where faith communities, local businesses, social and civic organizations come together to meet the needs of our local homeless population. We operate a year-round service center where our clients can shower, launder their belongings, receive coaching services, referrals, and HRT bus passes for eligible appointments related to medical, housing, and employment needs. From October of 2016 until September of 2017, we provided 6,128 units of service in our service center. That includes 2,800 showers, 1,700 loads of laundry, and 50 HRT bus passes, referrals, and mail. We are an active member of the Portsmouth Homeless Action Consortium, or PHAC, where we have partnered with colleagues around the table like Park, Behavioral Health, and our coordinated entry to get 8 individuals housed. We have further partnered with organizations outside of this area in Richmond to get individuals into alcohol and drug treatment programs. During the January snowstorm, we partnered to shelter our guests around the clock from Friday evening until Tuesday morning with no incidents. One recent success was a gentleman who lost his job and then his apartment. He came into our office in tears and ashamed. He didn't want his family to know his circumstances. He was with us for 4 months. We work with him. He's now in transitional housing, and he works at Kroger Marketplace. All in all, we have had some amazing accomplishments to be excited, and yet my heart still grieves for that 60-year-old grandmother who is unemployed and doesn't have enough work credits to draw Social Security. She falls through the cracks of eligibility for housing, and she sleeps outside in spaces not meant for human habitation. We're going to stay the course and continue to assist our clients to rebuild their lives. We also hope to contribute to changing the paradigm of many perceptions about homelessness. And we hope that as a community that we will rally together around this cause. So along those lines, I have 2 requests for your consideration. One is to consider revising the city's community and regional organizations grants so that those of us who receive them can receive the first quarter advance. For those of us who have to raise 100% of our budgets, that creates a burden and a cash flow burden. The second is to consider the possibility of a fixed location temporary shelter that can also serve as a one-stop service center to centralize services and more efficiently.
Ma'am, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Dr. Whitaker.
Point of that issue of homelessness is very important. Can we, if there's no objection from council, can we extend the time to make sure that we hear all? I didn't hear what you said at the end, actually. I mean, if you don't want to, if you don't think you need to repeat it, that's fine. I didn't, you rushed it off. I didn't hear what you were saying. But if council is okay.
No objection.
No objection?
No objection.
No. Please, if you'll just repeat your last request.
To consider the possibility of a fixed location temporary shelter that can also serve as a one-stop shop center to centralize services and more efficiently help individuals who are homeless get the assistance that they need to rebuild their lives.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Dr. Washington.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the information. What you just requested, policy-wise, is that in this document that you gave council?
No, that's an overview. I can provide that.
Right, yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes, I can provide that.
Thank you. The next speaker is Margaret Winley, and ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
My name is Margaret Winley.
Ma'am, would you move to the microphone, please?
Oh dear, I'm losing minutes. Okay, well, anyway, my name is Margaret Winley, and I give my greetings to all of you on council and mayor and sergeant at arms and lawyer and etc. And now, I'm going to have to be quick because I'm speaking on two issues. Well, one of them you've already heard. I'm just giving some more input on the Confederate monument. Relax, let the stress go. It's a big block of North Carolina granite. It wouldn't hurt anybody unless it fell on them. The dead don't fight back unless you believe in ghosts. And blessed are the peacemakers. Where are they? They're either hiding with the poor in spirit or they moved to another town. And you're going to notice that I'm just giving you something I wrote a couple of years ago, but I liked it. As per the souls represented by that statuary, my personal belief is that the dead have a sense of humor, so they're probably laughing at us all. Adults threatened by a piece of granite. Can't eat it, you can't wear it, not supposed to worship it. Its power lies in symbolism, but its ultimate meaning is in the mind of the beholder. The stone commemorates ancestors to some of us. To others, the memories are not as good. But just think of one thing. The people who extracted the granite got paid. At least that's what the way I interpret this statement, that the railroads paid for the work according to the application for the National Historic Register. People don't need perfect council people, but they need people who care about stewardship of resources and the welfare of the citizens. These are more important than ideologies. It's a big country. It's big enough for more than one idea about a lot of things. At least that's what the ACLU would have us believe. Although that monument was planned and built over 100 years ago, some of those people commemorated by that piece of architecture have present-day descendants living in Portsmouth. and some of them are voters. When I looked up the application, I found a family named Wannicott. And you just need to be considerate of descendants. I read in the Washington Post that it doesn't matter what the school book said when the monuments went up, because the monuments were designed by factories in New England. So it means what you want it to mean. And now my other opinion piece is about this big piece that looks like a mound, an Indian mound, across the street from me. Since it's right across the street, I go to the door, I look out, and I see it, and I cannot help but think about it. Looks like an Indian mound. And we haven't done anything to commemorate the Indians. These were the people that were here first. Maybe they weren't perfect. Well, some of us are descended from them, and we know we're not perfect. So we know they weren't. But that doesn't mean that they weren't loved. And these mounds, this is useful stuff. This is a real treasure. You know, children have to learn about the Native Americans in school. And I only got one more second here. They have to know about the Algonquian tribes. And you know, people don't know that much
Ma'am,
about it.
Your time is up.
Yes.
And the next speaker is Jim Winley, and sir, you have 5 minutes.
My name is Jim Winley. I reside at 443 Douglas
Sir, if you would
Avenue.
speak in the microphone, please.
My name is Jim Winley, and I reside at 443 Douglas Avenue in Port Norfolk, across the street from what used to be the Port Norfolk Elementary School, roughly 6-acre site that my wife was speaking about concerning the Indian mounds. The property originally was water. It was part of Hulls Creek. The tide went in and out, and the tide also went in and out from the area on across the street next to my property, where there's a drainage way and a drop inlet that belongs to my neighbor. And about the early 1950s, the city made a deal with the Corps of Engineers. Craney Island was not yet available as a landfill, and they dumped a lot of mud onto this site, the 6-acre site, and filled it in. And they also dumped trash and garbage and what you normally find in a trash dump. And around 1957, Port Norfolk Elementary School was built on that site. And they installed a methane remediation system the size of a classroom in this school building, and they had problems with it until 2007, when they tore it down with methane. And around 2010, the city entered into an agreement with a developer to develop the site. The developer originally wanted to put 44 units on the site. Myself and those that reside on my street on Douglas and the Port Norfolk Civic League adamantly opposed this project, and we fought it, and we appeared to this council numerous times. We hired an environmental consultant. The property is completely under a floodplain. It's in a floodplain area, and it was a landfill that, because the laws weren't available at the time, it was not properly closed, as landfills are required to be closed today and properly regulated. There, because of the mud, there's a potential for subsidence and settlement of buildings that would be constructed on this site unless you put in pilings that are normally associated with commercial buildings. The Civic League even hired an environmental consultant. The council sided with the developer and allowed the platting of 23 lots, which are pretty much shown on this plat, which I sent a copy of to council and staff today by email, and Mrs. White was supposed to distribute it. Specifically, we were told by Danny Meeks, who was at that time on council and who was involved as the principal in this project. He came to our Civic League meeting and told 60 people that they were only going to develop 13 houses on Hamilton, and that they were not going to develop the lots on Detroit and
Sir, your time is up.
well, maybe I can get with staff and get what I need.
You can. Dr. Patton, would you? Okay. The next speaker is Sergio O'Neill, and sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Cherry, and members of the public. My name is Sergio O'Neill, and I reside in the Capital Manor section of Portsmouth. I'm here tonight representing Virginia Organizing. First of all, on behalf of the Portsmouth chapter of Virginia Organizing, I want to thank those members of council who have come out to meet with us already and given us some feedback in regards to our accessibility and accountability campaign. We will hope to ask that if Councilwoman Lucas Burke, Vice Mayor Cherry, Dr. Whitaker, we're still working on you, and also Dr. Patton, if you don't mind meeting with us to come out and discuss some ideas that we have to make the city governing body and its appointed officials more accessible and more accountable to the citizens. I think that Virginia Organizing has done a great deal of work in this city with trying to improve the relationship between the citizens and the governing bodies, both city council and the school board. Now, since that didn't take long, I would like to address you all on a personal note. Dr. Whitaker, your statement about not having the movement of the monument decided by the citizens, I think that was very disheartening. I think that the citizens of this city should have more of a hand in the decisions that are made in this city, especially when it comes to costing this city a lot of money. We have more pressing issues than moving a monument. And yes, I am standing here as a black man, 30 years old, saying that to you. I think that we have citizens who could possibly take the $3 million or whatever it might take to move the monument after paying all the legal fees and the lawsuits and all that good stuff, and hope that the city would clean up the public housing projects. We have some people that are living in mold-infested units. that have gone to PRHA several times and nothing has been done. And maybe some of that money can be used for that. Maybe some of the money can be used to go to the school system to get some more qualified teachers in there, so they don't have to hire 200 more teachers in the next school year. Maybe it could go to the police and fire department, so we can get some more police officers and some firefighters in this city that stay here, not get trained and go to Virginia Beach or Chesapeake or Newport News or Hampton or wherever the case might be. I think we have our priorities mixed up. I really do, and it's a waste of our time as taxpayers to move something when we have human beings that need to be moved since the homeless issue came up, and nothing is being done. Some of those people have been homeless since I volunteered with Portsmouth Parks and Recreation back when I was 12 years old. And if you do the math, that is 18 years ago. And I'm trying to figure out, do we have an issue with moving stone, or can we have an issue with moving people? Because it doesn't make sense that we try to do so much to move stone, but we can't do anything to move people. I'm trying to figure out, and then we have some preachers that are on this city council that, if you look at the Bible, it says we need to take care of those that have less than us. We're not doing that. We can't stand in pulpits and preach that every Sunday and do the exact opposite when we're in an elected body. I don't find that to be funny or entertaining. I find it to be sad, and I find it to be just crazy what we teach our kids to have to, because guess what? Some kids are coming up, they're going to have to inherit these problems that are not fixed now. And I can guarantee you that monument is not going to fix those problems. I don't know what it's going to take to do, but I think this needs to be put on a referendum, that every decision that the city makes goes to a public hearing, because I think the citizens need more control into what's going on, because we waste a lot of money and it's going in the wrong direction. We can't be sitting here 10 years down the road trying to find money because we wasted it on the monument when we have schools that are falling apart. Just my 2 cents. Y'all have a great night.
Thank you, sir. Vice Mayor Cherry, thank you. You can sit down.
I just want to address the first part of his comment about his accessibility, because he leaving people with the impression that we didn't respond to him when it's not true. The young lady called me and asked me for a time and I can meet with you all. I gave her a time. She called me back and said that time was not acceptable. And so don't come up here and leave people with the impression that we won't respond when you ask for a time. We give you one and you don't take it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Steve Carroll. Sir, you got 5 minutes.
Steve Carroll. Partial list of servicemen who have died while in contact with the enemy. Pearl Harbor, 2,400. Tarawa, within the first 76 hours, 1,600. Okinawa, within the first 82 days, 12,500. Iwo Jima, within the first 36 days, 6,800. Other battles of notoriety where American bravery has been exhibited: Bastogne, Quai San, Edson's Ridge, Guadalcanal. When Omaha Beach was stormed, we lost 2,500 men almost immediately. D-Day alone, we lost 6,000. And before Normandy was broken out, we had 9,300 service people buried. They died for the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. My father served 27 years, almost 27 years, serving the military of this state and this country, and I was proud of him. And I remember him dressing up in his uniform when I was a child, and I was so proud of him. Watching him as polish his boots and his brass, and he was a handsome sergeant in his uniform. I love this country. I've made my love of my Confederate heritage very clear, but I'm an American. And the blood in my veins bleeds red, not communist pink. Think of a world where the Nazis had gotten the atomic bomb before we did. I find your comment, Mayor, intriguing about one person being offended. We should fall head over heels and do something about it. So I'm going to ask a question. Everyone in this room tonight, a member of the City Council refuses to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance of the flag of this country.
Mr. Carroll, no personal attacks.
Oh, I'm going to be very careful, Mayor. Thank you. I will. All those present tonight that are offended that a member of the council that is sworn by oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America, would you please stand?
Mr. Carroll, you're out of bounds, and I'm going to ask you to take your seat.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Mr. Louis Gibbs, and sir, you got 5 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak before council. I'll give an abbreviated greeting to the entire city government tonight. I didn't plan on speaking on the Confederate issue again, but it appears that once again, from the memory of the Civil War to the Confederacy, down to the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, mythical, fair-skinned Jesus, it appears that the privilege again has chosen to omit certain parts of history and remember the parts that they want to. Let's not forget that the Civil War was during a time that the Emancipation Proclamation absolutely did not exist. Let's not forget that the black men who fought didn't just jump up in front and say, hey, let me fight. Nor did they think that they would be bulletproof vests for the white men that stood behind them. Again, just move the monument, now that that's out of the way, to more important business. Many of you have already seen me, you know me, you've seen me around, etc. But not many know why I'm here. When I received the call to plant a church, I began to ask what city would be the best city for that. There was no greater city calling my family than the city of Portsmouth. My mother said, no, don't go to Portsmouth. My mother-in-law said no. My friends and family said, why would you choose Portsmouth to plant a church? We chose this city because of both its potential and its brokenness, its hope and its despair, its turpitude and its morality. When we moved to the city, we looked for the dark places, the forgotten corners. We initially moved to Truxton, and we got what we asked for. We discipled a couple to move into the place that we were in, and we left, and then we chose to move into Prentice Park, where the clouds got a little bit darker. Every night I hear gunshots, and my prayer is, Lord, please don't let there be another dead body on the other side of those shots. We hear sirens all the time. My daughters hear me asking that prayer for provision on the other side of gunshots so much that they now repeat it with me when they hear gunshots. Less than a mile from my house, there has been 6 murders. We serve our community from my yard. We love on our neighbors. We invite them in our house. 18 and 67, though. 18 and 67, those are the numbers I want you to remember tonight. 18 and 67, that's how many murders and heroin overdoses there have been since January. I watch prostitutes perform duties on the corner where my house is. Out of 7 days in a week, I see one police car ride up and down the street. 45 days ago, we began to organize a Stop the Violence march that is scheduled for this Saturday, October 14th. It's called the Casket Crusade, where we have actually gotten with a funeral home and will be walking a path where we got with the chief of police to map out where the murders have happened in the city. We'll be walking with a casket because nothing evokes emotion like a casket. Nothing evokes a self-audit like a casket. We are asking that the city would partner with us in this move as we attempt to steer crime and deter it in another way. It appears that social awareness, though, community engagement has a price tag on it. My city, since we have started this, continues to make changes, changing the community a task hard-pressed to accomplish. We were asked to follow procedure. We did. We were met with some resistance. We were asked to get a permit. We did, and we're still being met with resistance. Even up to today, we are still being met with resistance for a Stop the Violence march in a city that's far too violent this weekend. Once again, we are playing politics with the wrong thing. We're playing politics with our children's safety. While our leaders are playing politics with each other, more and more of our sons and daughters are dodging bullets. For those not fast enough to dodge them, we are burying them. This march is a cry for our city leaders, our community to work hand in hand. This rally exists to garner community engagement and personal accountability from a grassroots level. I implore you today to give us and lend to us any city resources you have, be it trash cans, trash bags, police officers, which we are being charged for, though there are other demonstrations in the city that don't have to pay that price. Again, please stand with us and stand with the community as we attempt to steer the crime that exists in our city in a different direction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes, Reverend Gibbs.
Yes, sir.
The issues that you raised, have you specifically given those requests to the city manager?
We have sent them through the proper channels toward the city manager. We were told that we didn't need a permit through the parade and permit planning, right? And then we were told then that they would get with the city manager and all of that, whatever needed to be taken care of would be. We then sent an email, I believe, the other day to ask, could we use the mobile stage? We also reached out to planning to get trash cans or trash bags. And again,
If it's okay,
Dr. Whitaker?
If it's okay with council, can the city manager update us on that issue either in email or tonight, whichever you prefer?
Can you do it tonight?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, as Mr. Gibbs says, that he has been working with the proper channels in order to address or plan for his crusade, of which I have the map right up in front of me, and the information that has appeared on social media. I do not have a collective list. Today, it was called to our attention through our deputy city manager that there was a request for the showmobile.
Mm-hmm.
And because Mr. Gibbs and his group planners are utilizing their activity on PRHA property at the end, Mr. Pace reached out to Mrs. Winston today. He has not talked with her, but left her a message to get permission whether or not whatever they are going to do once they get to PRHA's property, if there is the request through PRHA that the showmobile, if available, can be on their property, then we can't just go put something on property that is not ours. So that has been put in place today, and Mrs. Winston should get back with Mr. Pace at least by tomorrow. The request for other things I don't have, but if you're looking at trash cans, it would be us working with Parks and Recreation and not through planning for such items. So I would say if you could get, Mr. Pace will get with you tonight, and those specific things then we will look to see how we can address. In addition, I want to make one correction, if I may. We have had 13 homicides to date, and we are right today even with what we had at the end of December in 2016. So as we are all mindful and prayerful that we do not have any more between now and at the end of the year.
Thank you. Thank you. And you'll have your deputy get with Mr. Okay, thank you. Last speaker is David Fell. And sir, you got 5 minutes.
Mayor Rowe, members of council, and others, I'm the grandfather of a second-grade student at Simonsdale Elementary School, and she lives with us. Thursday afternoon, September 28th, our granddaughter, Starla Ray Fell, was almost killed because she was trying to cross the highway, and also because of the lack of concern for the safety of the children by a substitute school bus driver. Simonsdale School day ends at 3:55 p.m. and Starla usually rides the bus, which on Wednesday, September 27th and Thursday, September 28th was driven by a substitute school bus driver. On Thursday at 4:40 p.m. my wife called the bus transportation office to see why the bus was late and was told that the bus had just left Simonsdale School at 4:42. At 4:50 my wife joined me at the bus stop. At 5 o'clock, to our surprise, we saw the bus coming down Portsmouth Boulevard, one of the busiest roads in Portsmouth during that time of day. The bus was in the line of traffic waiting to make a left turn onto Cypress Road. Suddenly, we saw our granddaughter cross over in front of the school bus. She was trying to cross the 4 lanes of traffic on Portsmouth Boulevard. She had been let off at the wrong bus stop. Starla had never before crossed Portsmouth Boulevard alone, and she was crying and moving back and forth across the road trying to avoid the traffic. Starla was almost hit by several vehicles as she attempted to cross Portsmouth Boulevard that day. My wife and I ran to the intersection and to our granddaughter, who eventually made it across the highway into safety. Starla was upset and crying, and she was comforted by her grandparents and the other parents. Starla almost collapsed on the side of the road from her frightful experience. After getting our granddaughter safely home, I drove to Simonsdale to report this incident to the principal, Miss Darlene Bright. After giving Ms. Bright the details of the incident, she made a telephone call. And while she was on the phone, 3 other parents came into the office to complain about their children being let off at the wrong bus stops also. Apparently, the young children were as confused as our granddaughter because the bus driver did not follow the usual bus route from school to their bus stop. Several children were incorrectly allowed to get off the bus at the youth center on Portsmouth Boulevard and at the karate studio. They also had to cross the 4-lane highway and find their own way home. One parent said that his 6-year-old son had come home crying, arrived just before 5:15, nearly an hour after the child should have been home. The child had walked almost a mile from where he was let off the bus at the wrong stop. Mrs. Bright said that the Portsmouth City Council had held back money that could have been used for the hiring of bus drivers and for the training of new bus drivers. Mrs. Bright showed great concern for the children involved in this incident and for the safety of the children. These are my concerns. Why were these children allowed to get off the bus at the wrong bus stop? In my granddaughter's case, she knew where she was when she got off the bus, but confused at this point, my granddaughter ran down Portsmouth Boulevard and attempted to cross in front of the stopped school bus and ran into the oncoming traffic on Portsmouth Boulevard. Why didn't the bus driver, who said he let Starla off at the youth center and saw Starla trying to cross the highway in front of his bus, turn on his flashers on the bus? If it's true that the Portsmouth City Council is holding back money that could be used to hire and train school bus drivers, why isn't this money being released? Why aren't the bus drivers hired and trained during the summer months instead of waiting until the school starts and then realize there's a shortage? Why aren't the substitute bus drivers given specific routes for the bus route instead of allowing them to deviate from the established pattern of bus stops, thereby confusing the young children? Why are my granddaughter and the other children forced to wait almost 45 minutes to get on the bus to take them home and arrive home an hour after school is officially dismissed. On Thursday afternoon, September 28th, my wife and I almost saw our granddaughter almost get killed there on Portsmouth Boulevard trying to cross a 4-lane highway in rush hour traffic. We're thankful that Starla was not injured and thankful that the other children who were let off the bus at the wrong stops and had to cross the 4-lane highway and walk home also arrived safely.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Whitaker?
Mr. Phil, is that his last name? Mr. Phil? Yeah. First of all, Mr. Phil, I saw the news report on your granddaughter, and my heart went out to your family because that could have ended a lot differently. The issue you're raising is not a city council funding issue. It's a training issue on the school board side. I recognize there are some funding concerns, but at no way would this council look to put children in harm's way. And that's a training issue, which I know Dr. Bracy definitely has taken up with operations. And so I just want to make sure that clear on that that's not a funding issue, that's a training issue.
Thank you, Dr. Whitaker. This concludes our agenda, and this meeting is adjourned.